All right. We're in the book of James. I'm excited to dive into that in just a second. I'm Dave. I pastor this multi-campus church called Yakima Foursquare. We have a campus in Walla Walla, one in Richland, one in Sunnyside, one in East Valley. Our online campus, welcome to those of you that are watching online. Celebrate Recovery on Friday night, and then right here on good old 40th. And you know, I have a group of people that hang out with me on Sunday mornings before church, and we pray. And there's a special kind of mantle on them. They have a sensitivity to God. I consider myself not very touchy-feely, not very sensitive. Susie can attest to that, my wife. And yet these guys have that. And one of them came up to me as we were singing and just said, you know, I feel like you're supposed to let everybody know that there's a promotion coming, that God in this next season really intends to promote us. And he said that's going to look different across the board, as it always does individually. Each of you are going to embrace that or see that differently. Some of you are going to miss it completely. And I feel sorry for you if that's you. I want to encourage you to look for it and try to understand what that might mean for you. I just got some communication from Grace Green. She has landed on the ground in Central Asia. That is our missionary, and has already found housing and already started to meet with leaders. So thank you for your prayers for all of those things. Our missionary is off and running, and we're excited about that. And then I also got a thank you from the Water Project, which is where our Gift to the World has focused much of its energy. We have 62 water projects going, mostly in Africa. And if you haven't heard this, there is famine and drought in Africa. And it's crazy, so crazy, that what dominates our news cycle is Russian interference with our election, when they say the greatest humanitarian crisis on the face of the earth is happening right now, and that 17 million people are going to die of starvation, and the Western world knows nothing about it because we're all caught up in the politics of what we live in. I just want you to know we're trying to decide how we might respond to that, and we probably will in some way. There are some things. Foursquare has a Foursquare disaster relief arm that we're having communications with right now about what one local church might do to help make a difference. So know that is happening, and now let me talk to you about James. But first, let me tell you about my week. My oldest daughter, Annie, who is sitting right here by her mom. Yeah, I should just cry when I see my kids. So I'll fight anybody that wants to fight after service. I'm not as soft as I look. Just a little emotional. But the theme this week, oddly enough, was underpants. They've been with us all week, and I'm out playing pickleball with my older grandkids, and the youngest one, who's about 3, walks out in his Minion underwear. That's it. All he's got on is Minion underwear, and I've been scanning the movies because we're cinema. I mean, we love the art of cinema. We go to movies all the time. And I knew there was a movie out called Captain Underpants, but I had no idea what it was about. So I just started calling him Captain Underpants. And of course, it really offended him, made him mad, which of course just incited me to continue to call him Captain Underpants. Susie tells me all the time to grow up, and I just say, why? Why? So we went to the movie Captain Underpants, and if you've not gone to the movie Captain Underpants, it's not highly recommended, but boy, oh boy, if you have a 7-year-old and a 10-year-old grandson, take them to Captain Underpants, because the 10-year-old was basically flying over the arm onto my lap to repeat lines as quickly as they were coming out, because it was fair game. The bad guy was Professor Poopy Pants. When do you get to say that when you're 10 years old? His full name was P.P. Diarrhea-ski Poopy Pants Esquire. Their favorite part of the whole movie was the Whoopee Cushion Orchestra. I mean, there you go. You don't have to go now because you know. And then through the course of it, my daughter brings me this English, I don't know if he was a comedian or actor or something, but he's telling the story of waking up and in the dark putting on a pair of underwear and getting somewhere and realizing that he's actually put on his mother's underwear. And we're dying laughing. And so here's the theme. So guess what happens to me? I get up early in the morning. I don't want to wake Susie, so I put my clothes on in the dark. And my first trip into the bathroom, I look down, and sure enough, I've got my underwear on inside out. And I know some of you do that. You wear them one side one day and the other side the other day. Yeah, I'm not there yet. I will wear pants multiple days in a row, but not underwear. And I realized that as I was thinking about what I'm going to say today, I didn't even know I had my underwear on inside out. They were just as comfortable as all get out inside out. I had no idea. And as we're walking through the book of James, I think what he's trying to do is shake awake a slumbering group of people who call themselves Christians, and really challenging with the idea of, do you have this right? I mean, look how you're conducting your life. Look what you're doing. And again, we point people towards James when they're struggling because we're going to struggle. And that's the thing that James tells us. It's not if it happens, it's when it happens. You are going to have struggles in life. We live in a fallen, broken world. The chaos that was released in the fall just continues to ravage our world. And it will until Jesus' return. So it's just going to happen. But the thing that James reminds us over and over, and I'll remind you that James is the brother of Jesus. He had a bird's eye view of Jesus' life. He's working through both the filter of watching his brother do life, then becoming a follower of his brother, and now leading the large local church that is in Jerusalem. And again, he's looking at the people that he's called to serve, and he's saying, man, do you guys have your underwear on inside out? I mean, I don't think you realize what you're doing. But he reminds us over and over and over again, despite all of that, God's love never stops flowing towards us. It never stops. He over and over and over, as he once says you're going to go through troubles, and then starts to direct us towards the right kind of activities with regards to our life, he over and over and over says, you are so loved. So let me read today's section out of James to you. What good is it, my brothers and sisters? Again, this is the reference to love. You are brothers and sisters of mine, deeply loved by God. I mean, that's his declaration to us. If someone claims to have faith but no deeds, can such faith save them? Suppose a brother or a sister is without clothes and daily food. If one of you says to them, go in peace, keep warm and well fed, but does nothing about their physical needs, what good is it? I mean, he's given a case study. You say you're Christians, yet all of around you is pain, and you don't seem to be doing anything about it. How can that be? And are you really saved if that's the way you carry on? In the same way, faith by itself, if it is not accompanied by action, is dead. You're going to hear me talk a little bit later about dead faith. But someone will say, you have faith, I have deeds. And this is the other side of it. I'm just working like crazy. It's not really about faith, it's about works. And he's saying, that's not the way it is. And he says, show me your faith without deeds, and I'll show you my faith by my deeds. It lives itself out. You believe that there is one God, good. Even the demons believe that and shudder. I'm actually going to take you through a little discussion about what one pastor calls demonic faith. We believe like the demons do. Is that good? You foolish person, do you want evidence that faith without deeds is useless? Was not our father, here are his case studies, Abraham considered righteous for what he did when he offered his son Isaac on the altar? You see that his faith and his actions were working together, and his faith was made complete by what he did. And the scripture was fulfilled that says, Abraham believed and it was accredited to him as righteousness. and he was called God's friend. You see that a person is considered righteous by what they do and not by faith alone. In the same way was not even Rahab the prostitute. Again, a great story, another case study for James. Considered righteous for what she did when she gave lodging to the spies and sent them off in a different direction. As the body without the spirit is dead, so faith without deeds is dead. Again, James is trying to direct us towards the type of life that will really cause us to come alive. And he's just watching his people do life, and he's just saying, man, you talk a good talk, but you don't do anything that corresponds with what you say that you believe. You know, in the fullness of time, Jesus came. He came to save us. We get to walk into salvation through Jesus. He enters humbly into human history. And here's what's important to remember about what Jesus did. He knew exactly what he came to do. And he did it. He grew in wisdom and stature and favor with men and with God. He preached the truth. He helped the hurting. He healed the sick. He gave sight to the blind. He raised the dead. He rebuked demons. He contended with the religious of his day, and he emerged victorious. And on the precipice of the most important event in the history of the world, his crucifixion, the atonement for our brokenness and our sin, he paused to have a conversation with his Father, which is the longest prayer in our Bibles in John chapter 17, the longest recorded prayer. And here's what he says: Father, while on the earth, I have completed the works you have sent me to do. Faith without works is dead. He knew exactly what he was doing, and he did exactly what he was supposed to do. He completed the works that the Father sent him to do. And as he hung on the cross, his last words were very simply, it's finished. It's finished. I did everything that you sent me to do. It is complete. And for us, we need to remember that, because it's not Jesus plus anything. It's not Jesus plus baptism. It's not Jesus plus a good life. It's not Jesus plus speaking in tongues, Jesus plus tithing, Jesus plus better trying and trying harder. Because Jesus plus anything ruins everything. It's just Jesus. It's only Jesus. It's always Jesus. It's only Jesus who saves. That is his saving work for us. And we're not going to do anything that is going to change that. But if we are plugged into this power source, we had a crazy thing happen in our house, probably because we had so many things going on. But a breaker in one wall popped, which caused the electricity in the other wall to go out, and wouldn't you know it, it's the one that the refrigerator is plugged into, full of food. And of course, being the brain surgeon that I am, I couldn't figure out what it was, and every electrician I called couldn't do it. And then, believe it or not, my beautiful daughter over here is over on that plug-in on another wall, and she realized, something's wrong here, and poop. So I had to call back all the electricians that I'd called and said, my bad. But no power. No power. But if there is a power source that we're plugged into, things happen. And here's what happens when we're plugged into that power source. Jesus' power begins to transform us. Our appetites, our desires, our longings, they change. We no longer love what we used to love. We no longer do what we used to do, because we no longer are who we used to be. Right? Yeah. You know, that's the part that scared me to death before I knew Jesus. I was so afraid of what I was going to have to give up to follow Jesus. And I tarried, and I waited, and I even said to myself, someday I'll do that. but right now I'm going to sow my wild oats and I'm going to have some kind of fun. And I so regret that I didn't say yes to Jesus long before I did. Because man, has life been good plugged into that power source. Plugged into that power source. So as we look at this piece of scripture, Jesus is saying, you say you have faith. How come there's so much pain around you and you're not doing anything about it? How come? Now, again, my goal now is to ask you to simply ask yourself, how am I doing? And challenge you with the idea that you might have your underwear on inside out. See how I keep pulling back that underwear thing? I'm going to keep that theme going maybe for the rest of the summer. Because it's comfortable. This way I'm doing my faith is comfortable. But is this the way you're supposed to be doing faith? Are you one of those folks that just sits around and watches others do incredibly fun and great things? Thank you, all of you that helped in VBS. I mean, I came through here several times. Those kids were having a blast, and they were hearing about Jesus, and it would have not happened had not you adults that said yes and came and helped to do that. I honestly can I be honest with you? When I walked in, I was surprised at some of the adults that I saw here. I just thought, oh my gosh, them. That's unbelievable. I can't believe they're here. That's a lot of work, spending 3 or 4 hours with people that age, isn't it? Those of you that were here, are you saying yes and amen? That was a lot of work. But James goes on to talk about what he calls counterfeit faith. So let me explain what these counterfeit faiths might look like. The first one that he talks about is what I'll just simply call dead faith. Okay, dead faith. What good is my brothers, he says. What good is it if someone says that he has faith and doesn't have works? Can that faith save him? In other words, is he dead? And again, we're saved, and being saved is incredibly important. But what kind of dead faith and what kind of faith will you have if your faith is dead? In other words, if there are no works, which is, again, part of what he's saying. So in other words, you give lip service to your faith, but you have no lifestyle follow-through. No lifestyle follow-through. You know what religion does? Religion says a lot of things and doesn't do anything. That's what religion does. And that's what this guy says. James says, you say to them, go in peace. You know they have needs, but you just say, go in peace. Hey, I'll pray for you. I'll pray for you. You give these little truisms that make you feel good when there's much more that needs to happen. Do you know what dead people do? Do you know what they do? Nothing. It's not a trick question. Nothing. Dead people do nothing. You know what I discovered probably a decade ago as I'm dealing with people who are hurting is that I actually encourage them, you know what? This is going to sound counterintuitive, but I want you to start giving yourself away. I know you're in pain. I know you're hurting. I know tough things are going on, but here's what I want you to do. I want you to start giving yourself away. Because I believe if you start to get your eyes off of yourself and start to put them on others, start to recognize that others are in pain too, that God will do something incredible in you. Give action to your faith. Fruitlessness is what it's called. There is a dead faith. I mean, people who don't give, people who don't serve, people who don't care. You can believe in God, but it's the classic lazy, lukewarm, lifeless religion. And could it be possible that you could be baptized? There's a baptism back there. That you could be married, you could be buried in a church and end up in hell. Is that possible? Because James just says your faith is dead. It's dead. You know, church doesn't save. Jesus does. Tradition doesn't save. Christ does. Religion doesn't save. Christ saves. And it's not what you do, and it's not what the church does. It's what Jesus does and whether or not you trust him. I had some fun with my grandkids this week. I have a swimming pool. It's a fun story, long story. Won't get into it. But I stand in the water, I get into the water, and I tell them to jump to me. And it's amazing. The older ones are now swimming like crazy, but it's amazing how long it takes them to jump for the first time when they don't swim. Got their little water wings on, they're all ready to go, and you're saying jump, and you're literally this far from them, and they're doing this thing. And honestly, it's not until they jump that they trust, right? So if you trust Jesus, jump. Get rooted in what Jesus is doing. Now there's this reference here to the demons, and yeah, they know Jesus. And what does demonic faith look like? What is he talking about when he says, even the demons believe that and shudder? What is he talking about? And I'll be honest with you, this is something that has been battled throughout church history. And again, one author calls it demonic faith, so I just wrote it down here. And the issue is, we can believe everything that the demons believe. I'll remind you that there are several instances in our Bible where demons are declaring who Jesus is. They just, don't, please, Jesus, don't deal with us. We know who you are, the Holy One of God. Please, Jesus, don't throw us out. We know who you are. There's a man who had a spirit of an unclean demon, and he cried out with a loud voice, I know who you are, the Holy One of God. So the demons know who he is, and you can have dead faith, but you can also have demonic faith, where you just simply say, you know what? I believe that there's a God, and I believe when it's all said and done, if there's a good place, I'm going to go to that good place. You know, I'm not as bad as that one. Do you think God grades on the curve? Because I think there are a lot of people that are making that kind of declaration with their lives. Yeah, I believe in God. Nah, I don't go to church. No, I wouldn't even think about going to a life group. No, I don't read my Bible, but I'm a good person. And someday, and again, I'm just declaring with you, one author calls it demonic faith, and I just want to give you some aspects of that. It's a knowledge that doesn't transform. I mean, truly, if you know Jesus, your life is transformed. You are changed. You are different. That's the indication. A demonic faith doesn't really love Jesus. You know, it knows Jesus, but it doesn't love Jesus. It doesn't do what he says. It doesn't have any effort to try to get to know Jesus. It doesn't pursue Jesus. Doesn't do any of those kinds of things. And it's rebellious, and it's not repentant. Just, I'm going to live my life the way I want to live my life. And yet again, the interesting thing about people that are in that place, they honestly believe that when it's all said and done, they're going to step into eternity with Jesus. And I wouldn't base my life on that. So let me close with this. Real faith. Because real faith is dynamic. And that's the third way. And here's what he talks about. He gives us, at first he says, you foolish person. And then he talks about these two case studies, Abraham and Rahab, a man and a woman. And he says this about them. Abraham believed God, and it was counted to him as righteousness. Called a friend of God. You see that a person is justified by works and not by faith alone. In the same way, was not also Rahab the prostitute said. Rahab the prostitute. I don't know if you know her story, but Rahab was a prostitute. And can you imagine Rahab stepping into heaven and God asking her, how'd you do? And her going, well, geez, I guess I was a prostitute. I don't know how I did. But here's what's interesting about Rahab's story. When these spies came in, something triggered in her, something transformed in her, something happened in her where she recognized that these are God's people and I want to be with them. I want to be with them. So she began immediately to work towards and with God's purposes to protect these